I want to begin by saying I'm deeply honored that today I have this opportunity to tell my story of traveling from North Carolina, rural North Carolina in the South, to Washington, D.C., which I had never imagined, would happen, to me. My first want to give tribute to my family history, beginning with my paternal grandparents, Braxton and Lula Strickland. And next to my maternal grandparents, Everett and W. Locklear, and the many siblings that they had who were very instrumental in helping me grow up in the rural South. Next, I want to give tribute to my family, my wife Barbara, to my son Alric, to my daughter Carmia, to my son Caleb, and to my daughter Tabitha. And the 15 grandchildren that are a part of our family, and now the 5 great grandchildren, and one, on the way. And they are, the joy, of my life. Next, I want to share with you my story of growing up the son of a sharecropper in the rural South. That journey began with my parents living as sharecroppers in what is called the Mount Airy community, is where I was born, and we lived there for a number of years before we transitioned to a bigger farming operation in the town of Pembroke, North Carolina. Town of Pembroke is a all Indian town, and we lived at actually where the current Lumbee Bank is, and there was a farmland there called the Carter Farm, and my journey began there, as the oldest of eventually 11 children, growing up in that family, and I couldn't have asked for a more loving and caring and giving parents who taught us the principles of sharing together, to work together, to go to church together, and that experience, while I didn't know and understand at the time, was going to play out in my journey of life, because as the oldest, my father delegated to me, what the schedule was. What are we doing, and living on the farm meant that you would, begin your year in January, planning out your schedule for the crops that you were going to grow. So we grew cotton, tobacco, and corn. We had our own wheat, and then of course we had our own garden, and we had our own produce, a flock of chickens. We had a milk cow that we gave us the milk we needed, and then we had hogs that we would butcher, every year to give us the meat that we needed. And then once a year, we would go to the beach and come home with a big load of fish, and that would be our seafood, for the year. And I remember all of those, years of how that transitioned on a daily schedule. And that daily schedule began early in the morning and would go as late as it needed to be, in the evening, day by day. And we had one day of rest, which is Sundays, for when we would attend church. Once the family got bigger, we actually moved. My life there. I need to share. That I was attended the school system in Pembroke up until the 8th grade, and all the friends that I had known during those years, I had to leave all of them and to go to a new school, which was in the Prospect community, because we moved over to the basically what you might know now as the Union Chapel community. We lived on the W.W. Jacobs farm, which was a much bigger operation that would be supportive of our family, and that's when that would bring me all the way up until I graduated from high school at Prospect High School. And after finishing high school, I had received I was valedictorian of my class, and had received a full scholarship to go to college, which at that time was called Pembroke State College. And I also was able to live on campus, which had never occurred, in my life. Growing up in a household where you shared your where you slept, and when you have a total of 11 kids plus a mom and a dad, that's 13, and that's a lot of kids. But it was never a dull moment, in our household. And we always had a daily schedule for our chores that would coincide from the time we woke up until we went to school, come back, and then we would continue our chores until it was time for what we call supper. And my mom, I have to give her credit for the meals that she would prepare for her family. They were always plenty, on the table, for us. I remember that there would be times when we would have the pastor come and share a meal, with the family, and that was always something that was very special, for the family to be able to do that.
Now, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Now, before you had went to college, did anybody else in your family ever go to college before?
I was, as the firstborn, my mother went to college for 2 years before she met my father. But to be straightforward, I really didn't have any plans when I was in high school that I would go to college. Mm-hmm. And that opportunity emerged. And little did I know that was, years back, looking back years later, how critical that was in my journey. My experience in college during my first year as a freshman was, shall we say, being on your own for the first time, having that freedom for the first time, to participate in all of the various activities that was on campus. And a coincident thing happened by living in the dorm. And of course, I didn't know how significant that was going to be, at the time. I met these 4 young men who had come all the way from New Jersey to attend the college there. And for whatever the reason, I took a liking to them and they took a liking to me. Well, you might say, well, what is so significant about that? Well, the truth of the matter is, growing up in the South with a segregated school system of black, white, and Indian, you were really more or less regulated to the Indian churches, to the Indian schools, and if you went shopping, majority of the businesses was owned, by whites. And as a businessman, there was very, very few American Indians who particularly owned a business, and so it was something there that was kind of not necessarily said in words, but assumed that you don't really associate, you socialize, with anybody other than your own people. Well, these young men accepted me, and that acceptance, something happened when I opened to realize, well, they're not judging me by my color. And they've accepted me. Well, that was profound, and my first experience, and and that relationship continued on a daily basis. And there was an incident that happened that really you don't know really who your friends are until something happens that basically is not a good experience. We went to the theater in Lumberton, North Carolina to see a movie, and as we purchased our tickets, they purchased first and I was last in line. And so when I made my purchase, the ticket taker said, "Oh, you have to go upstairs. They can go downstairs." There was such a look on their face that I will never, forget. They immediately chimed up and says, "We are going to go where he goes." We went upstairs, and we had the best time of our life watching that movie. We were laughing, and then when the movie was over and we returned back to our dorm, I pondered what had just happened. That caused me to begin to think, oh, I can be just like them. I can be who I want to be. It's just a matter of making that decision to not be bound, by someone else's opinion, particularly when it's judgmental. Well, that was a huge event in my life that would open doors, beyond my expectation. And of course, I had a great experience, living on campus for those that freshman year that I will treasure, forever. That happened to me in my story. I I was able to finish college, get my degree.
Do you remember what year you graduated?
And that was I finished my degree in 68. And my degree was in biology and physical education. And so what was I going to do after graduating from college? Well, my wife and I had started our family, and so when you have a family, you need a job. And so as it turned out, one of my former school teachers, Thaddeus Oxendine, had during those years of being at the university, the North Carolina State Legislature had allocated some funding to build a culture center for the Lumbee Indians, because the Lumbee Indians, which is my tribe, is the largest, third largest tribe in the nation, and they were able to secure funding for a culture center because it was something very, very important to our people to be able to have a location where they could gather together. As I was saying, I had this job as the assistant manager for the opening of the culture center, and I was promised a salary, but I was only going to get paid, at the end of the year, and because they didn't have a salary for the assistant manager. So I had the honor and privilege of being the assistant manager, and we had this swimming pool, which was a first for our people, because up until that point, if you went swimming, you either had to go to Lumbee River, or you had to go to the beach, to swim. And of course, there were other locations that you could swim, and so that year went by, real fast. And at the end of that, year, I did not know what I was going to do next. But as it turned out, a friend of mine, who I was in school with, college, Bobby Jacobs, we were very good friends. He invited me to travel with him to Maryland, because he would go up before school opened to make arrangements for his housing. And of course, I accepted that opportunity because I'd never traveled out of the state of North Carolina. I did have an opportunity to do that in high school, but for a reason, the senior trip got canceled, and we were unable to travel to D.C. and then to New York for what we had planned as seniors that year. And that's okay. I didn't really. It was, if I went, I went, and if I didn't go, it was okay. But something happened when I went with my friend up to D.C., and I felt like I was in the Wonderland because I had never had that opportunity to visit our nation's capital. And of course, as you know, there are many things to do and see in D.C. So we were able to spend the weekend there, and they took me out to see this one location. I remember where they had gathered to eat crabs, and of course I had never seen that happen before. And they had this giant table, piled up with crabs, and next thing you know, they were coming back to refill it, and people were enjoying themselves. Now all of that at the time really didn't seem so significant because I had no idea of what would come next. So returning back to home and continuing with being a husband and a father, something occurred where the Lumberton JCs, they were the county seat, they reached out to start a chapter. They were known as chapters of the Pembroke JCs, and that was intriguing. And I said, and again joined the the JCs, and of course we had to get organized, and then we had to elect officers, and so forth and so on. And I had the honor and privilege of being the first president and also the second president. Well, being in the JCs means that you are community-minded. You get to know things that you normally would not know, and that means a very close association with the mayor and the city council, and what's really going on in your community that could be of benefit to the community. And that was twofold, because these were opportunities for you to learn what's the purpose of an organization, and then being an active part of that organization by attending meetings and being in the role of the president. And what did that really mean? And so we jumped in with all four, and it was a very, very exciting time to be in the JCs. We purchased land to build our own facility, which was called the JC Hut. And I was there when the road was put in. I was there when the building was built, and served in that capacity for 2 years. One of the projects that we would do around Thanksgiving and Christmas is we would prepare plates for sale, and then take those proceeds and turn it around and purchase wood for our elders to or any something similar in that regard. Well, what I didn't know and understand at that time was that getting that experience to gather together on a Saturday morning and set up a grill and you would grill these chickens, these half chickens, that and I'd never had growing up on the farm. Anything related to food was always done by the girls. Always something dealing with the outside was always the boys. So I'd never had an experience to didn't even know what a barbecue grill was. Little did I know at that point that just that basic opportunity, how that would play out later in life, because I became a caterer, as a result of that experience. But that's another story, down the line. So. Okay.
Good?
Yeah. The JC story unfolds in various ways, and one of those was once we were organized, we decided, well, we live in Robinson County and surrounding counties, and we have 16 communities. And what if we were able to have each community have their own JC chapter? And we went on a spree of forming, for the first time ever in our history in the communities, JC chapters. We formed a total of 11, and the North Carolina JCs and the national JCs had never seen such growth, in a local area. Well, we were doing it because we wanted to have those individuals to have the same opportunity we did to learn organizational, skills, be able to Robert's Rules of Order and and serve their communities. Well,
and were these all Indian chapters?
It was all Indian chapters, and that was significant. I didn't realize it at the time how significant that that was going to be. Well, at some point, there was a group of us, that decided that what can we do next once all of those chapters had been organized. Well, the subject of doing a annual event for where we would gather and celebrate our language, our history, and our foods. And we came up with the name Lumbee Homecoming. And this was the beginning of a tradition that still continues to today. And we did not know if it would be successful. We did not understand. All we knew is that it's something that we wanted to do. And of course, it was a success. And I was very honored to be the chairman of the first Lumbee Homecoming, as well as the chairman of the second Lumbee Homecoming. It was just such a, celebration, and we had individuals who traveled many miles from Georgia, D.C., and you name other locations who came to celebrate. And it, continues to grow till this day. And so what was going to come after that? for the JCs. Well, being in the JCs gets you to know a number of people across the state that you really wouldn't necessarily organize. Well, since we knew there were other tribes in the state of North Carolina, Halawasaponis and others, we decided that we need something that's a statewide voice to be the go-between between the Indian tribes in North Carolina and the state government. So we were able to talk with the governor at that time, who was Jim Holzhauser, and it's also one of his aides, a gentleman by the name of Bill Hobbs, who coincidentally was the state president during our tenure, my tenure with the JCs. And in the past, you did not know if something of a subject like that would be successful, but they were very supportive and agreed, and voila, we now have a voice at the state level, and again, it continues to this day to give our Indian tribes, a voice in whatever the matter, subject matter might be. And because you can't live in isolation, community means working together. So that was a significant event.
And what do you think were some of the main issues that the tribes all across the state were trying to advocate for with the creation of this?
Well, that's a very interesting question. First of all, we didn't know each other. Mm-hmm. And in order for you to be united, you got to know who you are. Of course, the Lumbees were the most visible, at that time. But the others felt that because they didn't have as many individuals or whatever, they didn't really matter per se. Maybe that's not the right way to say it, but I remember those very early days of the North Carolina Commission on Indian Affairs coming together, and they had to get together annually to celebrate, first of all, who they are, and secondly, to bring any matters that would benefit each of the communities. Mm-hmm. And over time, each community has developed its own stronger voice. I don't know how you might want to say that, but they're now known, no matter their size, they're now known, and they realize that by working together, it will benefit each other and the individual. And the governors, in most cases, have been very supportive of because there's a lot of funding that was being able to come in that would boost the state's economy as well as the tribe's economy. So it was a win-win, situation. Well, what is next in my story? Well, somewhere along the line, because of my activities with the JCs, unbeknownst to me, there was a company that was looking to relocate to a location for that they would be able to be productive. And that company turned out to be F. Goodrich Footwear Company. And of course, I did not know anything about that until it was actual reality that they had made that decision to locate to Robeson County. And but there were individuals that I was associated with through the JCs, and they wanted to have someone on staff to come on board who was American Indian, because that was going to be the prime. That basically was a large portion, of the individuals that was going to be employed. And I was approached, and it's coincidental because I did not know what was coming, after my year, with being at the culture center. So next thing I knew, I'm getting a job offer. I mean, I didn't have to, I didn't even have to apply per se. So they offered me a job, and it was the job I'd never heard of. Is I was going to be a junior time study engineer. Well, I did not know what that was, but I was able to again open the door for me where yeah, actually I can do that. And so that journey began with BF Goodrich, and at what they call a startup center, startup location, and where it was basically a center where they would get the first batch of employees trained before they went to an actual production facility. Training was going to be a huge element for it to be successful, because the product had to be quality product. And we then moved into the main facility, which is a very, very large. It was the largest thing that company that ever been located in Robeson County. So I served there in that capacity, and at some point, as they were able to start increasing production and bringing on more employees, they wanted someone in the front office to help do with the interviews. Well, I got asked to come over to the Office of Personnel and be an assistant personnel manager. Was I looking for that? No, I wasn't. But did I accept it? Yes, I did. And that's a key part of my story, is whether I knew or understood or didn't, I was always willing to accept something that maybe was not my forte. But going back to my earlier comment was, I believe I can do anything anybody else can. I just need an opportunity. That was my motto. And that's a motto I'd like to leave with my people. You can do anything that you want to. You just need to make that decision to accept challenges, in your journey in life. And I had a very successful tenure at BF Goodrich. Was able to hire a lot of our folks and anyone else who came in that met the qualifications or was willing to learn, the job. Well, interestingly, my next phase of my journey was unfolding, even though I did not know. I got approached by a gentleman called Bruce Jones, and Mr. Jones and his colleague, Mr. Roderick Locklear. God bless their soul. They're kind of gone on to their days in glory. Asked me to be the president of this organization they wanted to form at that time. And the reason that it came up was they worked up in the Raleigh-Durham area for a organization called Regional Development Associates. And basically it was an organization to help various communities, create jobs, in their communities. So people, a lot of our people If they could not find employment in Robeson County, they had to leave Robeson County daily, back and forth, to because there was really not a whole lot of job opportunities, for our people. And they said, we're going to call this Lumbee Regional Development Associates. Well, again, unbeknownst to me, I said yes, to that. But it all fit, and when I think about it, because up until that point, each part of my story was building upon the next story, in going forward. So as we begin this conversation, I recall that we would gather, and this was all on our own time, on a Friday night and a Saturday morning at the old foundry. A number of individuals that were likely like-minded, concerned to find a better life, for our people. And what we decided is if this was going to be achieved, it had to be representative, because we had 16, communities, Indian communities in Robeson County, and of course Hoke County was adjacent. We included it, in all of our, because we had a large population that lived in Hoke County, and so that took a while to figure out. So what we decided to do was much like where we felt that it was important to honor our ancestors because of the Indian schools that allowed us to have our own schools, as well as we had our own churches. We wanted to honor that because we wanted everybody to feel included. So that had never been done before. I mean, everyone was separated and in the past. But we wanted an organization that gave equal voice to each community. We didn't want one community to have more say-so, over, anybody else. And of course, we were finally able to achieve that goal of a board of directors that represented, all of those communities. And of course, we had the basic fundamental question is, where are we going to get, how are we going to get started? Where are we going to get funding for this? Because we at that time really didn't have a lot of extra funds. And I have to give a tribute to a gentleman called Robert Mangum, who was had come into the area through the Methodist Church to serve, as a pastor. And of course, hearing our story of what we were trying to do, he wanted to be a part of that. Well, that was certainly a new experience for all of us, because we didn't know a lot of people like Robert Mangum, prior to that. But he came in, and he was able to join us, in what we were trying to achieve. And I have to thank him, because he knew things, that we did not know, in being successful. Well, that was the beginning of LRDA, and of course, we once we started receiving funding for helping to create jobs. The ball, got rolling, and it created some enthusiasm and excitement, in each of our communities. We would rotate, our meetings, through the various communities, to stay connected. And so it was a great experience and an honor to, serve in that capacity. Also, during those LRDA days, there was an incident that happened on the university campus where there was the original structure that was built there to serve our Indian people. As the campus had grown over time, that building, as you can probably imagine, didn't have all of the, heating and air conditioning and so forth. And so eventually it was not being utilized. And so it sat vacant for a number of years. And there was, in the winter there, someone came in because of whatever reason they were, and they started a fire. Well, that fire got out of control, and the building was damaged. And then at some point, there was discussion about, well, what are we going to do with that building? It's not productive. It's not useful anymore. And there was consideration being given to turn that building down and then using that location, for an additional facility. Well, as it turned out, that there was several individuals who actually was 21 to be exact, that organized themselves and said, this is really not necessarily a good idea. So out of that became a movement called Save Old Main. Well, what's significant about that? Well, believe you me, there is a story there that it became who is right and who's wrong in this decision. Well, things like this can become political quick, and so as it turned out, this was an election year coming up, and the gentleman who was running for office, named by Jim Holzhauer, he showed up out of the blue and had a press conference, and that made the news. Well, wow, that was pretty enthusiastic, and it really, once it made the news, it became well known across that, not in just one isolated. And so being a former JC, being involved with LRDA, and you get associated with, at that time, was what is the predominant political party at that point in time was the Democratic Party. Well, I had again through those many years built a relationship with my elders who represented different communities, and we were working very well together, so I approached them because they had asked me to be the chairman of the Young Democrats, and of course I had accepted, and my question was, well, if the Republicans are doing this, why can't we have a Democrat, our person running for office, do the same? Well, you may not think that's significant, but these little things turned out to be, when you look back, if that little thing didn't happen, some other things would not have happened. And so, whether it's for you or for the community, it could play out either way. You just don't know. Well, I had requested that there be a meeting where we could discuss this topic. and maybe have the gentleman who was running for governor at that time, come and do a press conference. Well, at that time, the Democratic Party was being a gentleman by the name of Johnson Britt, who was, our chairman. When he was asked, to do this, he responded a couple of days later, upon inquiry, that we didn't need to have a meeting to talk about it. Well, little did I know that that was not sitting with me too well, personally, but it didn't really seem to bother, my peers. Little did I know at that time that how this would be later. And being at RDA meant that we were receiving letters, very slow, because it was always about job opportunities. And as it turned out, the Economic Development Administration in Washington, D.C. was looking for Native Americans to come on board to go into a program for becoming industrial engineers. And you might say, well, why is that significant in your story? Well, the story is that the U.S. government, years prior, had approved several industrial parks to create jobs on Indian reservations. And after a number of years, they realized, well, there was no jobs being created. So they asked the magic question. Imagine this years later, which should have been done in the beginning. Why is jobs not being created on the reservation? They says, well, all of the people that come in that's got the qualifications for those jobs are non-Indian. We want our own people to have that same opportunity, to serve our people. Voila! What a brilliant idea. Well, then that's where this job opportunity, this letter that came in, that was recruited. Well, as it turned out, that was going to be my next, journey in life. Little did I know, and because I just felt that it was time for me to move on. I did not know and understand, so I gave up my roles, my responsibilities. I quit my job at Goodrich, and I resigned, my position, with LRDA, and took this opportunity that was available to go to Washington, D.C. And so next thing, I'm as it turned out, by Bobby already and his wife Artie already being in Maryland, I requested that I would be able to stay with them during this period of time, and of course they accepted, for me to come and stay with them. And of course, I had to make a promise to my wife that I would travel home quite often to be with my family, which was very important, and I was able to, it was not a problem for me to travel back and forth for those days. Well, that story in my life began at the Appalachian Regional Commission, which was the organization that was my host, and a gentleman by the name of Coda Collar was my advisor, and he took me under his wing, and that journey began with learning the ropes of what the Appalachian Regional Commission is all about. But also significant was that we were we were able to get enrolled at Georgia Tech to get our degree in industrial engineers, our credentials, as they had a program there, for that purpose. And that was a two-year journey, in my life, that it was significant. Well, I did not know if I was going to accept a job, again, in that capacity. But before that occurred, another phenomenon was happening all the way in the state of Maine with what is known as the Penobscot tribe, who was seeking their federal recognition. And a gentleman by the name of Tom Terrain decided that, well, there are other tribes in the East Coast, east of the Mississippi, that don't have federal recognition. And he decided that there needed to be a conference. And as it turned out, a colleague of mine who was in this program, with me to become an industrial engineer, a gentleman by the name of Andy Akins, and we had become very good friends during that 2 years. He was chosen to head up as a coordinator for the Northeast, and I was chosen to be the coordinator for the Southeast, sight unseen. And so while I was still employed with the Appalachian Regional Commission, I accepted this, responsibility on my own time, to coordinate this, particularly on my off time, during the weekends, and when I would come home to be with my family, which was a kind of a double duty, at the time, and so fast forward to December 8th, 1972, at the Roger Smith Hotel, history was made because for the first time ever, we had Indian tribes from the Northeast and the Southeast, east of the Mississippi, gather in the same room at the same time to talk about the same thing. Imagine that. And we did not know each other, at all. And this 2-day event was very significant in so many ways, not only in my story, but in the story of all of those tribes who did not have federal recognition or who had been terminated, in the 50s. At the end of that, 2 days, which, it was a 1-day conference, and then at the second day, what was significant about that is the attendees there decided that they wanted an organization to be created that would unite us, in bringing this matter, to the attention of the federal government. And there were two big significant decisions made that one to get organized, and the second was who was going to head up that organization. Well, I had in my role with this conference was basically just being a coordinator. There was no other identified role for me. But as it turned out, again, I call it what you may. The gentleman who was supposed to start the meeting was late arriving, so you can't get a whole bunch of Native Americans together without them wanting to get the ball rolling, and because there was a lot of excitement in the room and enthusiasm. So it was determined that we needed the leaders of this conference decided we kind of need to get this meeting underway. And next thing you know, I raised my hand and said, "Well, I can start the meeting." And so again, goes back to my journey, being in the JCs and so forth and so on. And so the meeting's underway. About 15 minutes later, the gentleman who was supposed to lead the meeting, he showed up, and I looked to my left, and I motioned for him to come on and take over. And he looked back at me and he said, No, keep going. And I'm like, okay. So next thing I know, we had a very successful meeting because I was very familiar with Robert's Rules of Order, so forth and so on, and the meeting played out, to everyone's satisfaction. And of course, the next day, the question was, are we going to form an organization, and who's going to lead her? Well, they made that decision. It was called the Coalition of Eastern Native Americans because it represented all the tribes east of the Mississippi who were non-federally recognized at the time, regardless of their location. Well, the next order of business was, who's going to lead this organization? A motion was made for me to become the leader for that organization, and of course I had come to. This was the end of our journey, being with the program from the Economic Development Administration. So next thing I know, I have a job. I wasn't looking for a job, but I had another job in Washington D.C. because my plan was basically return back to North Carolina because I didn't have anything planned of what I was going to do next. Well, that journey began with SENA for about 3 years, and during that time of being with at SENA, I was able to, as a sidebar, help getting the D.C. Lumbee, D.C. Maryland folks together, because there was many of us in the area, but we were, we really, not connected. During those SENA days, they were very exciting and involved. The Nixon administration was in office at that time, and the National Congress of American Indians was located in Washington, D.C., and we knew it was essential to have those opportunities, to connect. Because it not only helped us, but it helped others, and so the Nixon administration, believe it or not, was very, very supportive. They were allowed us to bring our concerns and issues. They helped to get a big grant, to our organization, SENA, to help us continue providing, opportunities, for those tribes, that were ready for us to. They were ready to start going forward in their local communities. And so again, during that time, there was a movement called Takeover of the BIA. And of course, being already in Washington, D.C., and having a gentleman by the name of Tom Oxendine, who was at the BIA as a public affairs officer at the time. A number of my colleagues from the Lumbee community arrived to be supportive of that effort, and of course, I was supportive there, as well, because the voices, a lot of our fellow tribes, in the West did not feel like their concerns were being addressed, and they made their presence known by occupying the office of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and it was a pretty significant, event, that happened. But it was able to bring a lot of focus to issues that were more or less being sidebarred because of the not many Native Americans was in high positions, throughout the various government agencies that was delegated actually to serve our Indian communities. Mainly education, mainly housing, mainly economic development. And so this was a very pivotal, event, that happened that helped provide exposure or to tribes getting the assistance that they needed. And of course, we know at some point, the matter was resolved. But after a significant, period of time.
Do you remember how long that lasted?
I think it was 3 months.
Okay.
Three months or so that they occupied it. The federal government didn't necessarily like it, but it helped the tribes eventually, because Congress couldn't ignore what was going on over there. And Helen Scherback at the time was on the staff of Senator Sam Ervin, and his top aide at that time, Bill Hobbs, who I had known through the JCs. We were able to get their ear, and when you're a senior senator like Mr. Evans was, you kind of get some of the things accomplished. They were able to help get some boarding schools. They were able to help start, what they call Indian controlled school boards, established, because there was not that many individuals who had the qualifications, to be the leadership and serving those various capacities, at the local level, as far as what a school really is all about. But you needed to have the people that children and grandchildren were being served. They need to be able to say, well, these are our priorities. These are our needs, for our communities. Because there's a long history of the school boards, and I won't really go into that. That's a whole nother area. But it had to be something that was not conducive to family, keeping families together in that regard. So at the end of my senior days, I was wondering what I was going to do next, and a gentleman by the name of Dr. Bobby Brayboy, and his wife Elizabeth, who he was employed at that time with the Office of Indian Health Service Administration. And of course, if there's a Lumbee within 50 or 100 miles, you get to know one another. And so he knew at that time that, I was looking for employment because I didn't know what was going on. Well, Dr. Brayboy had some way he knew about a program, again, that was being under the Nixon administration. It was called the HEW Fellows Program. And what it was is it was an opportunity to bring together individuals from various communities to help them learn what is the role of various government agencies, and that all these agencies are supposed to be serving our communities, but if you don't know about these services, you really can't partake of them in the way that they were, truly designed. And this was a 2-year program, and we would come together as a group, and I think there was 22 of us, and we would meet, as a group, but we also assigned to various federal agencies, and we got to choose at the end of the program, which agency we wanted to get assigned to. Well, for whatever my reason, I did not know that much about the BIA, etc., and I felt that some of my other colleagues would benefit more from that opportunity than me. So I chose the Social Security Administration, and that was quite a new adventure there, and they accepted me on board, and so. It was a great experience that allowed me to learn opportunities, that and what a government agency is really all about. And as you near the end of that, you need make a decision. Well, what are you going to do with this opportunity? Well, as it turned out. The Social Security Administration, offered me, a federal position, with their office, as a GS-13, which was pretty high level, coming into the government. Well, I can't really explain to you at that time. That I eventually turned down that opportunity, because going back to my journey of when I came to DC, I came to DC again thinking one thing, but as it turned out it was another, because during that time in DC we were able to again through Senator Irvin's office and there were so many different agencies had a definition of who an Indian tribe was, and they were all different, but they was from the agency point of view, not from the tribe's point of view, and so that was problematic, and we wanted one definition, and we wanted that definition to be defined by who we said we are, not a federal government agency. And so that might not seem significant, but it was significant. The other thing was that to make more programs available, different federal agencies other than the Bureau of Indian Affairs, to our tribal communities, because they needed more opportunities for housing, economic development, for social services, you name it. They needed that, those opportunities. So when I had to make my decision, I had to remember, why did I come to Washington, D.C.? And I felt I came because I wanted to continue to serve my people. Um, and so I didn't accept the job. Well, you might think that was not a really wise decision. Well, you could look at it that way, but really I don't, because I knew there was something that else there was for why I was here. Why was I here? And Dr. Sherback, who had finished up her time with Senator Irving, who had retired, well, she realized that there needed to be an organization, that would help promote, her passion, for working with Indian tribes, and so the tribes that had, as a result of CENA, that still needed, services. Well, since we had gotten to know each other, over the years, and I was looking for something to do. I joined her, in working with that organization to continue to work with the tribes, east of the Mississippi. Not necessarily, although we didn't regulate ourselves to whoever we could support. We were very supportive of anyone and everyone, regardless from whether they're from west of the Mississippi or east of the Mississippi. And at some point, again, what was her next phase, she got asked to come on board because the Office of Head Start, the gentleman who had been there for many years, had retired, and the person who was in charge of that office decided. I'm not sure how he got to know Helen, what connection, but he had decided that this job should belong to an American Indian, for the first time ever. Mm-hmm. Because there was a very large, significant population of American Indians being served by that office. Well, Helen came on board, and as it turned out at that time, that they were needed to add on more staff, and so there was There was 3 other individuals, including myself, who's number 4. We were brought on at the very same time. I got a phone call that says, "I have a job for you." I'm like, okay. Was I looking for a job? Because growing up in North Carolina, my job opportunities before B.F. Grudich came in is I could be a farmer, I could be a preacher, or I could be a school teacher, or all 3. Well, none of those possibilities intrigued me, at that time. Well, not really knowing what Office of Head Start was all about, and I knew I needed a job, I accepted. Well, little did I know, that when I joined, that in that capacity, how that would really be my next story. I call it the crown jewel. I've had many accomplishments in my journey, but this, in my opinion, was the crown jewel, because I was, as a federal officer, you have a lot of responsibility to be a voice in Washington, D.C. for local Indian communities, and for many years, I served as a very vocal, outspoken. I was very vocal and outspoken when I felt that something was not being done in the right way. That did not necessarily set too well with some folks in government, but that did not deter me, at all. So I was able to travel for 30 plus years, throughout, Indian country and non-Indian country, serving in that capacity. And I never would have thought that that would be something that would be dear to my heart in that regard. But looking back now, I realize you didn't know from the beginning, but that was kind of going to be your ending, so to speak. In your in being a voice, for our people, and being an office of Head Start again allowed me to get to know it was called the office administration. And the office administration had they were the largest administration, within HEW, at the time. A lot of social service programs, and one of those offices was what is called the Office of Program Research and Evaluation. And of course, over time, I would be able to see, various documents with statistics and those kinds of things. Well, that really didn't necessarily strike a bell, with me in that regard. But one of the individuals who I must give a shout out to was Alita Myers, and for some reason she had this desire to approach the office called the American Indian Alaska Native Program Branch at the time, and let us know that there is a report done annually called AIN FACE. It's called the FACES study, and this study that they were responsible for was being it was a document that went to the government, that because they want GAO always one government accounting office, because a lot of folks don't necessarily know what those acronyms are. That says, well, for these dollars, these are your results of how the program was benefiting because it was a nationwide program. Well, interestingly, when she pointed out that this report, at the end of that report, there was an asterisk at the end of that report. And in that, by that asterisk, it says, does not include American Indians. That did not sit too well with me, or my boss. It just rang a bell that I did not know and understand at that time why that happened. And so that began another kind of a event, in my story of I got introduced to a topic that really was not a necessarily topic I enjoyed hearing about, and it was called researcher. Because growing up in our community, we had someone who would come in and do research and write a book, and they said it was for us, but really it was for them, and that kind of leaves you hanging not necessarily being that fond of someone having that kind of experience, because you've had enough in your life. You don't need more, in that capacity. Well, I got introduced to, what is research all about, and this office, who had that responsibility, wanted to, for the first time ever, include American Indians, in this study that they did annually. After the gentleman who was our leader at that time, a gentleman by the name of Bob Bayless, who I'd gotten to know over the years because he had worked in the Indian Health Service, for a number of years at the Navajo Reservation, which I was the program officer for them for many years. He was in supportive of the concept. We were both, however, we felt that it just could not be the way they wanted to do it. It had to be our voice. And so what did that require? Well, believe it or not, it required that we have a meeting of the leadership that had the oversight, of Office of Head Start, to discuss with the individuals who were already currently out in the field, and which included, at that time, not that many Native Americans. So at the Museum of the American Indians, we gathered, for 3 days to talk about how this could become a reality. And the lady that was leading up the office administration at that time, and her first name is Linda, and I can't think of her last name at the moment, but she had grew up on the Ute Mountain Indian Reservation, and so she was very, very supportive of making this, a reality. Also, A&A, Office of Administration of Native Americans, Leadership, Sparks. Again, I can't think of her first name, but you can put that in later. Who we sit for 3 days and we begin that discussion. Day one, I would tell you that the non-Indians in that room hearing the discussion for making this happen, you could just feel the tension, in the room that day as the conversation got underway. And so we had to be able to come to pass. I think her last name was Thompson, Linda Thompson, so day two, we were able to make significant progress in beginning to brainstorm. Let's do this, what we call, you might want to call it the Indian way, to honor three things. It needs to honor the language, the history, and the culture. If it did not do those three things, because the trust between researchers and Indian tribes throughout Indian country was so broken that as soon as you mentioned the word researchers, that it was a non-conversation, and rightly so. It's not right, and so by day three we had ironed out the details for Lillian Sparks who was heading up A&A at the time, where our daughter coincidentally is currently employed in that office, which again an organization that was to provide a voice for American Indians at the government level. And so what began at that point was another 3-year journey of them reaching out to our tribal communities to join us because it had never been done before. We were making history. because you wanted Alaska included, and you wanted the voice of all the tribes, to be included, in this endeavor. And that's a huge undertaking which had never been done before. But so we were able to get this, what is called the AIN Faces study group, who began meeting on a regular basis to iron out the details, with the consultant, the federal government team that had been awarded, who would do this actual study. They had people who were very familiar with how to conduct studies, and so it was history in the making. Now, was this an easy task? I would tell you beyond a doubt it was not. But we had determination, and when we faced those what might be considered insurmountable challenges, there was something that I would just something in my heart that said we can overcome this. Well, at the time that you say that, there's not a whole lot that this is impossible. You're asking to do something that never been done. Well, just because it's never been done doesn't mean or if it was tried before and didn't work, that doesn't mean you stop. It means somehow you got to continue. Well, a little bit known to me, over time, it was determined that I would bring inspiration when it was, needed for whatever the reason was. Is that something that I was doing on purpose? Absolutely not. I never do anything, never have done anything just for me. It was always about listening to the voice, of the people who were not in the room, but they wanted their voices to always be honored and heard. And so that was just so important to me, for that to happen. So history will now show and record that we were able to be successful in conducting the first ever FACES study, which was a 2-year study. 1 year to conduct the study, another year to produce the results, of that study. So we are now included in that national report that goes to Congress. Well, you might want to say, well, how significant is that? Well, it's huge, because Congress makes decisions based upon data, and data comes from research. So the issues, the voices of our tribal leaders now and our tribal administrations, which has grown in capacity over the years tremendously, that voice is now coming in form of data. So you don't necessarily have to voice that concern. During my tenure at Office of Head Start, we would have what we called, the government had what they called a annual tribal consultation. And they would do regional consultations, and they would do national consultation. Well, after a while, I was very excited, in the beginning of attending those consultations, because we're going to get our voices heard. Well, over time, I come to realize, well, I heard that 5 years ago. And I'm like, why is this not sinking in? That what the tribal leaders are saying, these are our priorities, in our communities. Well, little did I know it was because the government doesn't come out and say it in so many words. But little did I know, you don't have the data to back it up. But this report, for the very first time, was able to serve as a model for across other federal agencies to do likewise. And so that we're not being repetitive year after year. We're making progress because the issues in Indian communities don't go away unless there's some support, to overcome, whatever, whatever the community has identified, as a concern, whether it's elderly, whether it's, housing, or whether it's a lack of social services, or Indian health services. It was very, very important and critical for them to feel like I feel like I keep repeating myself and nothing happens. Also, I can't really tell you that without also seeing, I played another role in my and being in the Office of Head Start. I became known throughout the Office of Administration. For being vocal. But Office of Program Research and Evaluation was not just for our office, but they were for across the board. And one of my big issues was this. Government agencies contend to operate in silos. And silos is not necessarily a good thing. Yes, you were organized and you were funded as a government entity to do X, Y, Z, but you have partnerships that whether you're over in this federal agency or that federal agency, the issues and more helping the community as a whole instead of separate. You're able to help the community in being more assisting them in what they feel that their priorities are. So now we have cross communication and collaboration within those agencies at Office of Administration, because it is the biggest administration serving our Indian population. And kind of as the conclusion of this opportunity I have today to share is that the journey is not over, because for many, many years there was really a lack of individuals who had those credentials in research. And and due to the fact that those individuals that were associated with Office of Head Start, they had, unbeknownst to me in my early days, they already had a group of directors of Office of Head Start, where they more or less was their voice, their constituency that they listened to. Well, what are your priorities? Within they had an organization called they had the Indian directors had their own association. Where they would gather, annually to meet and for a week to have various workshops, and the staff, the local level was able to come and to get various trainings to priorities that were very often set by the Office of Head Start, and they had arm that was called their technical assistance, that was to provide those training opportunities to this one individual, Michelle's, and she headed up. She got involved with the University of Denver, Colorado, and with a grant that had been started by one of her colleagues to assist as a technical assistance resource to the Office of Program Research and Evaluation. And they did not restrict themselves to just that role. They took the initiative, on that. Now that we had been able to achieve what this study, would face us, well, let's build upon that. What can we do next? And so, again, continuing, they did not have to take on this, with being a resource, if you will, to be a voice annually. So so they do an annual meeting, and this meeting is all designed to bring together various individuals who have excelled in some kind of research related to Indian tribes. But you have to have an organization that is a voice for what is it you really want to accomplish. That's really not necessarily a government per se function. You want to develop your own voice in that capacity. And so during my years, at Office Head Start, that really took root, and with this concept of, getting together. And there was also a group of individuals who had been regionally associated with that in the beginning of the AIN FACES study. They carried over. And because that voice had to always remain on an annual basis. So it was twofold when they would have this conference. And after of course, I retired a number of years ago, and rightly so. I feel like I had honored my commitment to coming to Washington D.C. and during those years, unbeknownst to me, traveling in Indian country. The Lumbee tribe is widely known, and so when they hear that name, they know they know who's making reference to, and the fact that we're still not quote unquote federally recognized, which I want to protest that on record. That we are federally recognized. What we don't have is the funding to go with that recognition. But that's a whole nother story that's still unfolding 100 years later. And I'm hoping that at some time, whether I'm leaving to see it or whether I'm not, that chapter will be finally closed because it's the right thing to do. And so I've been asked to stay on in retirement and go to that annual meeting. And we have, I think it's one or two calls, one in the spring of the year and one in the fall of the year, by Zoom, to get updates, because a lot there's so much unfolding as a result of what happened there. Because to just kind of wrap up, in the past you had NCIA, which was a good strong voice. You had the National Indian Education, which was a strong voice. You had the National Tribal Chairmen's Association, which was a voice. And I'm sure I'm probably leaving out, some others and that had formed, over the years, but we were not connected, and this was, a concern to me that what if we unite? Yes, we're located in different location. Yes, we have different priorities. But the one thing that unites us is we're all American Indians. We're the voice it is our voice that needs to be heard. And when you unite, there is power when you unite. Does that mean you disregard your own separate organization? Absolutely not. In no way should it. But Congress listens to a united voice. State governments respond to a united voice. And so, being the first Americans, and I don't mean that in a negative way to whoever else, is now our brothers and sisters, but you have to remember, who are you and why are you here? You don't need to give that up, but you need to honor who you are. So, in conclusion, I'm greatly honored to share this little bit of my story, with whoever may hear it, now or later, whatever the case may be. And if just anything comes out of this, I want it to be that the motto is, you're not bound by circumstances. You have been put here to live out that part of your story that you will not know until you take those. You got to take on those things that are little things that may not seem significant, but when you look back on these many years later, for me, I feel that from my story began with my family and continued through all of these many, years. When I first came up here in the early 70s, I never thought I would still be here, this many years later. And my families grew up here. We're now in over 30 individuals, in our family. And growing up in the rural South, son of a sharecropper, I would never have thought that my wife Barbara would have had the opportunities she had, because we got to know one of the members of the board of directors for SENA when they were doing the bicentennial. She got hired by a gentleman of the name of Ralph Rensler from the Smithsonian, and because they needed an additional staff member to come on board to assist with that 12-week event of celebration, she recommended Barbara. And Barbara joined that in that capacity, and she has retired 40 years later, and it all began with that unseen opportunity. So don't turn down when something may not seem, well, that's not my dream job. Thank you very much.
Thank you.